well, Turkey and Germany are really not the best terms now.
But not in the field of science.
No.
In other circumstances.
No, but these go via government.
No.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, a very welcome to this meeting of Hope, of Horizons in Physics Education. My name is Leopold Mathelitsch and I'm one of the chairpersons of Working Group 4. You know, Working Group 4 is the last one in this row, and therefore with our forum in Bucharest next year, I think we will more or less close this project of hope. First of all, I would like to thank the local organizer, Darko Androić and his team for this wonderful organization of this meeting. So thank you, Darko, and I ask you to give us some welcome address, please.
Dear colleagues, dear friends, I would like to welcome you here in Zagreb, almost at the center of the main square of the capital of Croatia. Today afternoon we will proceed with a few elected talks, and I hope that our speakers will occupy all of your attention for the rest of the day. Tomorrow we will spend all day at the building of University of Zagreb. I would also like to announce my colleague and friend and also vice rector of Croatian Physical Society, who will also welcome you very soon. According to him, we have a very nice place for tomorrow meetings. Last day, at the Saturday, we will be placed at the Faculty of Science, Physics departments, and from the Croatian part, my colleague from the Croatian Physical Society prepared a few demonstrations and lectures for you, and I think it will be interesting for all of you to see how especially student section and also teacher section of Croatian Physical Society advertising physics and you try to incorporate physical idea with the rest of the people outside the university. Finally, I hope most of you will be present at the social event during the Saturday afternoon. Weather forecast becomes better and better comparing the weather forecast I have in my last mail. So I think we can proceed with the schedule I already proposed, and of course few modifications are always possible, so don't hesitate to suggest me something during the coffee breaks. In goal to prepare this meeting as successful as is reasonably possible, I hope we did not overlook any major thing, and I hope you will enjoy in a conference talk during this afternoon and tomorrow. You will enjoy in Zagreb, and also after that you will get good memories from Croatia. Thank you for coming in Zagreb.
Next, I want to welcome the representative of the University of Zagreb, Professor Miroslav. He is Vice Rector for Science and International Cooperation. Please, for your welcome address to this.
Good day to everybody, and welcome to Zagreb. I'm basically a neuroscientist working on the human brain development, but at present I'm also in this building, serving as Vice Director for Research and International Cooperation. So let me just, since I realize that many of you are for the first time here, let me just say a few introductory words about University as a host to our meeting. So University of Zagreb is the oldest, the largest, the most comprehensive, because we cover from arts to sciences to humanities, and in terms of scientific output and education, the best university in Croatia and in the wider region. And we have, accordingly, two main roles, or at least we assume that we have such roles. One is wider societal role, because university, together with the Academy of Art Sciences and the Church, is one of the three pillars of Croatian identity, preserving tradition, culture, and everything. That's our really important role. All other universities were spin-offs from our university, or they are not very comprehensive. But the other main role is that we are research university, not just teaching. And in this sense, we have a duty to make our scholarship international and worldwide, and secure bi-direction interactions in this sense. So that kind of meetings are very welcome to fulfill this. And I see you have very interesting and good visual identity. You have a long tradition and of a series of steps, because it was step program before, if I remember well. Now you to the new hall, so it's very nice visual identity. So we are proud that our physics department, we have many distinguished groups which have international recognition, but most of them are in biomedicine and natural sciences, such as physics. So faculty of natural sciences is a really important part of our university, and we are always ready to promote their activities, because they always have good activities and good international recognition. So we are proud to be host to such important meeting on education and part of this European network. And we hope that what we provided in these other buildings and together with school will be good enough to fulfill all your needs. And with this I wish you successful conference, and weather, as he said, really easy proving. So maybe it will be too hot at the end, like last week, but nevertheless, I hope we will get nice memories from Croatia and come again to visit both university and our country. So I wish you a good conference and successful activities.
Thank you for this welcome, and also thanks again for this hospitality and honoring people at the university. Okay, the head of HOPE is the management committee. So, next, Madine Witkowski will greet you and welcome you on behalf of HOPE.
Yes, thanks a lot, Leopold, sorry, and thanks to be here, all of you. I know almost all of you now. Some new faces are present, so I will be happy to know you for the first time for this WG4 meeting, focusing on teaching education for teachers in the secondary schools. And I'm very happy to announce that the date for the next meeting has been set up. This will be in Riga, 5 to 7 November. It's a message I sent you. So if not all of you receive this information, it's good to know that the next meeting for WG4 will be in Riga, 5 to 7 November. Also, there will be this Coimbra forum in which the activities of WG4 will be presented. So mostly the results that will be the outcomes of this meeting. So here during this meeting we have to work together in order to focus on specific topics and to define some actions to do. Like what do you produce as a questionnaire or template or different kind of instrument in order to get more insight in the topic. So I hope it will be very fruitful, but I'm sure with very good presidency we have Alex and Leopold, it will be very fruitful meeting. And if you have any questions about the network, also all these administrative details and so on, please you can come to me and I will try to do my best to answer your questions. Also, you are invited to contribute to the Coimbra Forum. Your contribution, it can be even on WG4 activities. So if you have already some initiatives you want to present, you are welcome. It's not only for Bucharest meeting. You can already present some of your best practice in the field. And I think this is basically what I wanted you to know. And if you have any questions, you can come back. So, thanks. That's all.
Thank you. Now we are coming closer and closer to working group 4. So, in principle, there are 3 persons responsible for it. One is Marisa Michelini from the management committee, and as you heard already, Mohorić and me. And now Aleš will give a welcome from our Leopold.
So, I'd like to welcome you everybody to Zagreb. It's my neighboring country, and I would like to thank Marisa for praising us as being effective leaders, and it shows. There are 30 minutes assigned to this introduction. We spent 10 and we are already at the end. I can only say Leopold and Marisa do not need any introduction. They are quite well known in the community. I am standing here just for you to remember my face. Perhaps you have seen my name written around. And we will be coordinating the work of this work group 4. This is the first time we meet. Here we will lay out the plans of what to do. We will have a chance at the Coimbra Forum to reiterate and maybe take care of some works of encouragement. And the last meeting, working meeting, will be in Riga in November. And of course, then there is a wrap-up forum that will be in Romania, Bucharest next year. So, with that said, I think we can afford a small pause before we begin with the next talk. Well, the speaker has to put up his... and maybe it's best that Chairperson introduces you.
Okay, thank you, Aleš. I think it doesn't happen too often, huh? So one is in advance in time, so... Okay. The topic of working group 4 is improvements in teaching, in training and supply of physics teachers. Thank you. I think also that we have so many partners shows already that this is to some extent a hot topic. And I'm really looking forward to the discussion and about the proposals and the work we will do in the next more or less 1 year. But on the other hand, we are not alone. And other institutions have similar problems and also have been working on this. And therefore I think we should be very aware what is going on in other institutions. And one of these institutions, one of the leading institutions in physics education is the Institute of Physics in London. And I am very glad that Chris Shepard really agreed to join us in this first meeting. Chris Shepard is teacher support manager at the Institute in London in the education department. You know, IOP has many programs. Chris was involved in several of them, for example, teaching advanced physics and so on and so on. And today Chris will give us an insight in his working experience, but also an overview on IOP programs on this topic. So again, thanks for coming, and I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. Okay, yes, so a little bit of background. Leopold has said something, but possibly worth just giving a tiny bit of extra information. I have a degree in physics, taught for 18 years in the state sector in England, and then for 13 years have worked for the Institute of Physics. You might ask, why did I leave teaching? I enjoyed teaching. It was a good thing to do. It was pleasurable. It was a creative thing. But towards the end of those 18 years, I realised there was a significant problem in terms of teacher recruitment. I was working in a popular school. Physics had approximately some of the largest numbers of pupils going on to study it, aged 16 to 18, and yet we couldn't recruit enough physics teachers. And it seemed to me, as a result of going to a European forum, which was, I don't know if any of you know of it, but it was called Physics on Stage back in 2001. It still exists as Science on Stage now, a European forum of physics teachers, and then subsequently all the sciences. I thought, you know, I need to do something. I need to try and do something. So if my children decided they would like to become physics teachers, that wouldn't be impossible. Because at the time, it didn't seem to be like a particularly good profession to join, a particularly good job to do. So I heard about the Institute of Physics and I thought, that's good. They seem to be a capable group of people. Perhaps if I joined them, we'll be able to do something about teacher recruitment. And that turned out to be the case. Again, Leopold said a bit about the Institute. You may know, but we are very fortunate in that back in about 1920 in England, there were two physical societies, approximately speaking, that merged together. So we obtained a monopoly, which then meant that when we started to publish and became a publishing house, we were able to have a significant publishing income. And that has been enormously important. If we just relied on our membership, the fees coming in for membership, I wouldn't be standing here. There would only be about 3 people working for the Institute of Physics. The rest simply wouldn't exist. As it is, we're able to staff an education department of maybe 20 people in London, and teachers working very part-time, maybe 100 or so working for us, helping other teachers. So we are very fortunate in that we don't just rely on member income, otherwise it would be a very different situation. In England, the biologists are in that situation. The society, or the Royal Society of Biology, is tiny. There are about 3 people working for it. The chemistry situation is very similar to us in that they have a large publishing income, they publish journals, it's very profitable, and they again can do charitable work in education. So we are fortunate. I am an accident of history. I simply wouldn't be here if it were not for an accident of history in about 1920, where fortunately a merger took place and some very wise physicists decided they'd start as a publishing house. So that's a bit about me, a bit about why I became involved in the Institute of Physics, and some more about the Institute itself. Okay, so a little overview of the English education system. Then I'm going to go through a number of problems. I've read, again, the Steps 2 report, and the problems could fill 50 screens. And we have the same problems in England. There are countless things I could speak about. I've simply chosen these 3 as in some sense representative of what we have been able to do, and what we haven't been able to do as well. So it's kind of a representative sample. I could speak on almost anything. Pupil in discipline, pedagogical content knowledge, all sorts of things that I could speak on. And indeed, there are a number of speakers I know coming later in the week who will be addressing just those things. But I've taken 3 essentially, and then the last one is some kind of hope that, as to where we can move forward in the future. Okay, so the English education system. By no means perfect, but it's the only one we've got. So here we go. Essentially, everybody studies the sciences, as it says here, until 16. I was talking to a colleague just earlier, and this doesn't mean that everybody likes physics or understands it. It doesn't mean that everybody is taught by a physics specialist, but there is someone standing in front of them. And everyone does study physics in some shape or form until 16. Then they go on to do what we call A-levels, so age 16 to 19, and approximately 33,000 out of 600,000 go on to do that. That is a popular subject amongst boys, not a popular subject amongst girls. Then of course it slims down again, and we have less than 1% go on to do physics as a degree subject. I don't know how that compares across Europe, but those who do go in, pretty much most of them stay put. Most of them will graduate from physics. And I know there are various differences in different European systems. So again, it'd be quite interesting to compare notes. Whether that is success or not, how we define it. And as I'll say later, about 5 times that number go on to do engineering. I probably, in my 18 years or so as a teacher, I probably helped, I don't know, 2 dozen, 3 dozen or so people become physics graduates. I probably produced 100 or 200 engineers. I should be paid by the Royal Academy of Engineering rather than the Institute of Physics, because by and large that is where most people doing A-level physics go on to. Then as it says here, there's a kind of crucial line. I should draw a line across the screen at this point. You then have a very variable number who go on to do a single year. In our system at the moment, there's just a single extra year to become a physics teacher, and the number can vary and has varied enormously. Finally, as I said, you find that various people actually go into the teaching profession. Not all of those come from physics. A significant number come from engineering, and they may or may not have done an extra top-up course. So there are some conversion courses. Okay, so this one, the poor uptake of physics amongst girls over the age of 16. Well, it's not just a problem in England. I think it's fair to say that across all of Europe there are issues in this area. What I can attest to in the UK is that there have been an extraordinary number of initiatives. You may have heard my colleague Peter Main talk about this back in Helsinki, and indeed, if the slides look familiar, that's because they are his, so I should credit Peter in this section. He is one of our experts in many things, but particularly in the girls in physics area. So again, the graph that shocked me is this one. Whereas with mathematics over the years, the number of students doing A-level, that is 16 to 19 exams, has pretty much gone up in mathematics. In physics, with those various interventions, if we're being absolutely honest, it's gone down rather than up. And this is mainly professors and engineers coming into schools and trying to persuade girls that they should do engineering. So what would appear to be very sensible initiatives have failed dismally. The extra line here is simply for those who are starting a single year's course. The dark blue line is for those effectively finishing a 2-year course to get the full qualification. So you try something once, it fails. You try something different. Well, actually we didn't. We tried pretty much the same thing for about 20 years. And that same thing was intervention, small intervention schemes, marketing, various things to make physics more popular amongst girls. And in the end, we said, okay, we need to think again. Sometimes, because the intervention strategies, when we measured the number of people being recruited into physics or engineering, again, we discovered that after some visits, the numbers went down. We were actually, again, putting people off. And part of the trick is to be hard, to be very clear about the data, and to admit when you got it wrong. We had to admit we got it wrong, badly wrong. So, a bit of a rethink. And I kind of almost state this because it does raise debate. People say, it's not our fault. Maybe it's brain wiring. Maybe there are significant gender differences in terms of the actual brain itself. And we have these discussions. And we have to be honest about it. And as far as we know, the research seems to show that in terms of the differences between male and female brains, there are far more differences within one gender than there are between the two genders. Oops. So it's not essentially anything which appears to be inherent. Again, this is an active area of research, because people quite rightly say, might there not be some fundamental differences? We don't think so, but it's worth actually checking. we have to gradually gather other pieces of evidence. And the next piece of evidence is really that in England, we have a number of different types of school environment. We have mixed schools, boys and girls together. We have single-sex schools. We have state-funded schools. We have schools that tend to be for the wealthier, private schools. This is probably chaos, but it does actually give us some variables to play with, albeit crudely. We can try and track down to see if there are some differences in terms of this. It's not a great experiment. The variables aren't completely controlled, but it does enable you to try and notice some differences. And we did notice there were some differences between single-sex schools, all-girls schools, and mixed schools. And there was a significant difference in terms of the uptake. It was significantly higher in the single-sex girls' schools, which leads us to think that probably there is something in terms of the environment. It's not anything, probably that is the simplest explanation for the data. So, if you like, we went from a situation where we were puzzled about a 20% uptake amongst girls, and within the confines of the physics school laboratory, we were endlessly debating what can we do differently. And that was, if you like, the situation maybe 5 years ago. And then diagrammatically we shifted. And we said, okay, maybe our problem is we're not looking wide enough. Maybe there is actually a reason for this behaviour. The question mark is levitated, not because it's strange, but because there is an enormous field surrounding this. There is an environmental factor which is actually affecting us. Well, further evidence for that. If you look at the various subjects along the bottom here, for entry, for A-levels, 16 to 19 exams, you find that physics, the percentage for physics amongst girls is tiny at 20%. There's only one thing worse, and that's computing. So yeah, we're not quite bottom. It's always nice when you're not quite bottom, isn't it? You do feel like, I'm not quite the worst. But again, well above 50% are a number of subjects, including, interestingly enough, biology. So there is something going on there. So it's not just physics, it's not like everything is 50%. It's not like we're the odd one out, and somehow we are an aberration, we are a difference. There is something here, and it goes across various subjects. So, given that the research that shows brain wiring doesn't seem to be particularly different between the two genders, again, maybe there are factors which are pushing up certain subjects and combinations of subjects and pulling down others. That's the presupposition here. Okay, so again, we had this change of strategy. Why? Because again, we've been doing the same thing for 20 or 30 years, and it makes sense to have a change of tack. So this was probably the best of the old approach, and it was, if you like, where we got to. We had a series of research papers were put together for us, and the compilation of all the research and good practice in schools. We looked at schools where there was a particularly high uptake of girls doing physics, and this is where we came to. These are some of the ideas. Present the big picture, that is to say, give girls the context, not, say, why are you studying Newtonian mechanics? Why is this important? What is going on here? Give it some context. That seems to help. Don't just talk equations, not just mathematics on its own. You have to develop the ideas alongside the mathematics. And you know what? It turns out that actually boys like that too. Actually, that is simply better physics teaching, full stop. And it turns out for most of these, that is the case. Simply better teaching encourages more girls, we discovered, to take the subject. So don't use just one or two illustrations, use a variety. And we go on to the list here. Collaboration. This thing about risks, the ability to take risks in public. This is a classic one. Vary the grouping in class to avoid passivity. There is a tendency we discovered, and this is not new I'm sure to many of you, if you put a group of girls and boys together, what tends to happen is the boys take over, they run the experiment, by and large the girls tend to sit back. We may not like that, but it happens to be a research finding. And there are various these other things. Use analogies, have a rationale which includes social evidence. So this was good. This was the best, but it was still a failure because the graph keeps going down. So if you like, that was the best of the old approach. So we have to change. And the way to change is to make a splash. In this case, to make news. This is the BBC website. To give you a bit of background, we commissioned a report called significantly Closing Doors. Nice joke in the title really there, saying that there are various things which simply close doors to girls. It's not they have even a fair chance of doing the subject. Various things, bad things have already happened to them. So we had a government minister help us to launch the report. We had various seminars. We got it on the news. My colleagues, Peter Manamaxon, found himself being interviewed on the radio, TV, various things. It made quite a splash. Why? Because you have to start to change and influence opinions overall. You have to influence government. As I'll come back to, one of the ways you can influence government is to get to the media first, to make it memorable, to make it a newsworthy item. So that succeeded, and so numbers of my colleagues up very early in the morning doing TV interviews, having to go into studios in London, down the road from us conveniently, and do various radio and other interviews, which is good, because we don't normally get out. Yes?
In the beginning you showed the graph of the difference between the uptake of girls in maths and physics, and apparently maths seems to be more successful, at least the number in the end is almost twice as high. Did you get information about why maths is successful, about their approaches?
That is the problem. Yeah, I asked my colleague, because I'm not an expert on this, but I asked my colleague just before I was leaving, and she said, no, we don't yet know. That's not to say there aren't reasons. In some subjects, it's not the number of girls going up, it's the number of boys going down. But for maths, if I showed you the overall graph for maths, it would have gone like a sine wave and then going up meteorically. Maths has been very successful. So no, we don't. That's an excellent question, one I posed myself, we have not yet answered. So we need to collaborate, we need to find out the answers there. I could guess an answer, but I can't give you any research. Yes?
Do you have any data on what happens when you do nothing?
We have, all we can say is that some interventions made it worse. So doing nothing, I suppose the only data you have on that is going back even further, 40 years, where nothing was done. And so it's a poor experiment. I suspect doing nothing is probably going to be worse, but that is just an assumption on my part. Okay. So we then said, okay, let's just focus on physics. Let's take it, in fact, 5 different subjects. And we did a point score. We tried to look to see, in terms of the uptake of each of those 5 subjects, how do they compare? So English, economics, physics, a number of subjects across the board. Some where there were more girls than boys and vice versa. So that was the attempt, was to try and look at it, not just to make it physics on its own, but to all the subjects. Then what we did is to go into a number of schools and to do some focus group work. Many of the schools who signed up for this saying, yeah, we're happy for you to come in and look how about genders. In fact, about half the schools who agreed dropped out. So it was politically a nightmare. It was dangerous stuff for them as a school to do. It was risking their reputation, so they pulled out. But the remaining ones, we were able to do some useful work. By this time, because of the press releases, the government was interested, and they wanted the inspectors to come and do some work with us. We dreamt up 3 different kinds of interventions, and then one particular project where we had all 3 kinds of interventions all in one go. So these are the sorts of interventions that we went for. The first one was about confidence and resilience, this fact that I know well that from personal experience, one of my relatives, she went in to do physics, but because she was the only girl in a group of boys doing it, she dropped out after a few weeks, aged 16, from her studies. So there are factors there about confidence and resilience, because if the girls are in a minority, can we actually help them nevertheless persevere with the subject? The second strand was similar to the old work, looking at the experience of girls in the classroom. The third strand was looking at the entire school culture. How do you go about talking about any of the subjects? And for us, this is different. You know, we're the Institute of Physics. We don't do anything else. And suddenly we find ourselves reluctantly being sucked into this extra area, which is not normally our area of interest. But we felt, on the basis of desperation, that we owed it to our pupils to do this. So what do? Strand A. This is looking at gender stereotyping and the resilience and the confidence building. And a nice quote here from Beyonce. I like this. I think I should have this up on my wall. You know, that whatever happens, you're going to lose at some point. But actually, you have to be able to cope with failure. And so we try and use role models and different means to get that message across. The third one, I just picked out, we could pick out any of the three, but the third one seemed like a good idea. Yeah, you identify with the diagram on the right, a baked potato, so easy, a husband could do it. Is that a little bit biased? Does that betray something about view of men and their culinary skills, their cooking ability? Is that research-based evidence? So we talk about gender stereotypes, and this thing here, which is a massive thing for us, unconscious bias. I think I am a very fair person, but actually if you subject me to all kinds of tests, I turn out to be a very unfair person. And there are all sorts of tests you could run on me psychologically now, and however hard I tried, at some point I would betray, inevitably, some kind of bias, which I'm not even aware of myself. And again, it's one of those interesting things where we have to go to the social scientists to do some of this work, and you know, it's very pervasive. Very few people start out trying to be unfair. You know, most people try to be fair in their attitude. So it is quite interesting that it's the unconscious bit which is tricky. Developing lesson plans on gender, again, was an important thing. Okay, so this is, as I said, unfamiliar work for us. But in the absence of the old approach working, we felt we had to do this. And I think the lesson we draw from this is go public, make it newsworthy. Because once you make it newsworthy, people start to notice, the government starts to notice, they start to change things. It's good to have intervention strategies, but actually they haven't worked. And we have to be realistic, so we have to move to a bigger strategy that sometimes involves not just physics. Okay, well this is a subject I know in some ways I'm more familiar with, because this has been my job for about the last 12, 13 years or so, and a subject which is particularly close to my heart. The restricted supply of physics teachers. So, again, worth just informing you, because there's no reason why you should be particularly familiar with the system in England. We have a sequential model, so in the language of steps 2, it's after you've completed a bachelor's or a master's degree. And again, in England, we're very strange the way we do our degrees. We're not Bologna compliant. We have strange 4-year degrees, but there we are. We've now got to live with that. I know we're messing things up for Europe. There we are. So that's how it works out for us. And then there's a 1-year qualification after that. Why? Because it's cheap. Yeah? And because no government is going to pay for a system as good as some of your systems, where you spend 5 or maybe 7 years developing your craft. But it is unthinkable in England to spend more of 1 year doing a PGC, because it costs too much. Because government ministers, it's just unacceptable. So we are stuck with a single 1 year. This is based in a university. This is going back for the last 22 years. Notice it's not quite 2015 here. There have been changes that I may have time to refer to at the end. but roughly speaking based in the university, but 2/3 of the time was spent in a school. So the university brings the research evidence, the pedagogy, how children learn, their misconceptions, the things they get wrong, how they think that balls moving through the air have a forwards force acting on them, all these kind of things. And 1/3 of the time, say, spent back at university, 2/3 of the time with teachers in schools who have been trained up by the university as mentors to look after them. And a very small percentage in that era learned as on-the-job training in employment-based route. So that was until very recently the majority of the system, and it still is. I'll speak a little bit about the last 3 years if there's time at the end. So a sequential system, for better or for worse. Well, it looks like actually in some ways for worse. And this is, if you'll forgive, this is a historical situation. I started my degree there. That is where I graduated, and there is roughly where I became a teacher. And in the course of my 18 years or so in teaching, teacher physics recruitment went up and down like that. Very approximately, there's an average of about 300 a year going into physics teaching. Though that data is not absolutely rigorous, because nobody bothered to keep it properly, really. So that's the best data we've got. And most of those fluctuations are because of the economy. When the economy is good, of course, people don't become physics teachers. When it's bad, people go into physics. And some of those stay. Some people who didn't think they would do physics, but they actually end up doing physics because it's the only job they can get, actually turn out A, to be rather good at it, and B, to enjoy it. So that's good. Sometimes recessions are good for us. Unfortunately, at this point where I just joined the Institute of Physics here, this was particularly bad. We had reached almost our worst ever teacher recruitment situation. And it was very, very gloomy at the Institute of Physics. There were, in an office a little bit smaller than this, about 5 of us. So when I walked through the door on the first day, I opened the door and I thought, is this it? Is this the education department of the Institute of Physics? 5? Just 5 of us? Is that it? And it was. And we were in a mess, because basically it was deemed that physics would never recover. Physics would be, with all due respect, as happened with the classics in England, the teaching of Latin and Greek, which has gone down and down and down in number until it's almost completely vanished, apart from a very few privately owned schools. And there was a serious talk that physics could actually go the same way at that point, because they saw there being a feedback loop. Fewer physics teachers, fewer pupils going to do A-level physics, fewer people going to do university physics, fewer physics teachers. It's going to be a spiral going down, and nobody could see a bottom of it. And the government wasn't listening, and nothing was really working. So it was a pretty gloomy situation. Now, I'm not saying that I managed single-handedly to transform that, but I'm just saying, if you feel despondent in the situation you're in, we were exactly in that situation back in 2001, 2002. Some people were saying it's never going to recover, that we are powerless. How can we influence this? So that was interesting. I personally felt that was wrong for a number of psychological reasons, as I'll come on to in a moment. The A-level statistics, again, the 16 to 19-year-old examinations told pretty much the same story. This was the higher points, and then there was a continuous decline. Some of that was because the medical profession no longer required people to have physics as part of their medical training. And that was a significant blow. I can't give you the exact date, but I think it was approximately around there. There were some other reasons too, but again, A-level numbers were quoted, and again, we seem to be in a terminal decline. You know, we were not going to pull up. This one was going to keep going down. What were the causes? As I said, some of it was because of the medical profession. Some of it was variations in the economy. There is an inherent fluctuation. As we can see, there's an inherent fluctuation. But there was this major shift, again, which we have referred to in the past. The government decided to tackle the problem by hiding it. That's a great way to tackle the problem. We will take the wallpaper and we will see a large crack in the wall and we will put the paper over the crack, and that way everything will be solved. And that's roughly what happened, because nothing changed. They simply changed the labels. They didn't change the number of people going in or any of the systems. But it suited them to change the labels. Why? Because they said progress occurs, and some academics said this too, some university colleagues and some inspectors said, progress occurs on the boundaries of subjects, biophysics, various things like that. This is true. Therefore, the logic says, where the sciences meet is the most important bit. But hold on a sec, don't you need the individual sciences to have boundaries so they can overlap? Don't you need specialists who can work in interdisciplinary groups? Because if you haven't got any disciplines to start with, you can't have an interdisciplinary group. Seems obvious to us, but clearly not to them. So science became the dominant thing, and combined science was the subject which was sold, and it was basically assumed that if you could teach physics, then you should be able to teach chemistry, and vice versa. If you could teach biology, you should be able to teach physics. Why? Because the sciences all share the same methodology, the scientific method. Well, there's a couple of things, in my opinion, wrong with that. First of all, and this is a slight distraction, feel free to disagree with me, there isn't such a thing as the scientific method. There are a number of scientific methods. That's the first thing. Secondly, it just doesn't really work. Changing the labels doesn't change anything. And to expect people to get good at one subject when they're actually good at another subject doesn't work. My own head teacher, when I was teaching in the school, was a very talented chemistry teacher. He is one of the most popular authors in England. He earned probably as much for being a head teacher of a school as he did from his publishing income. In fact, probably rather more. He had a very, very nice house indeed. I wasn't jealous, of course, but he was a very famous author. And he said to us as a physics department, "Chris, I would like to come and teach some physics." And because he's the head teacher of the school, the principal, we couldn't really say no. It was a disaster because he confused the pupils, because he assumed that he had the stock of stories, he assumed he had the understanding of their misconceptions, which he did not. He assumed there was no such thing as pedagogical content knowledge. He assumed that just by reading the physics, he would make himself a good physics teacher. It was a disaster. And we politely had to shove him out of the timetable the next year because he had just confused the pupils completely. So that was some of the difficulties associated with labelling. So you had a false idea about science, you had papering over the cracks, and you have a relabelling problem. Okay, well, again, more doom and gloom. It does get better. This is a model because we've been able to, if you like, model how many physics teachers, specialist physics teachers we think there are. There is a lack of government data, which is still quite serious. It's got better in recent years. We do have something called the School Workforce Census, which logs every single teacher in England and pretty much all the lessons that they teach and their initial qualifications. There is an enormous database. It's quite difficult to get hold of. That's the tricky thing. Anyway, that database didn't exist at this particular time, so we had to use a private survey. We paid, or another charity paid, and from that we were able to produce some models of the number of teachers. Now there should be, for physics, about 10,000. And there should be 10,000 in biology and roughly 10,000 chemistry teachers. But if you look at the actual qualifications, we think it was probably about there. The situation is probably worse in terms of the pupils' experience. It doesn't mean to say that 70% of pupils were taught by a specialist. It was probably rather lower, as I think the Steps 2 report actually indicates. But certainly the situation was bad and it was getting worse. So, what did we do? We decided psychologically the best thing to do was essentially to get behind the government, to be that effectively if the government turns round, we are effectively behind you. We're behind you. So when if he turns around, this is a classic trick I did as a teacher. When you come in as a group of pupils, you walk to the back and set them some work to do. And then as soon as one of them turns around, you're always looking at the back of their head, yeah? So it's a great trick as a teacher to do if you have to cover a lesson that you're not actually normally doing. So we basically decided that we would outlive the officials, because the officials' half-life is about a year, and maybe about 1.5 years is how they stay in post, because their career structure forbids them to stay in the same post. It just is unacceptable, unless they are very senior. If they're very senior, they may stay for 10, 15 years, but most officials stay in post. So we were dealing with a series of relatively young officials, certainly inexperienced. They were just getting good after a year. After a year, they knew the data. They understood the system. They were beginning to make good decisions, and then they left. But we decided that if we could essentially stay close to them, we would be able to influence the newcomer, because the new people coming in treated us as the background. We were the wallpaper. We were the assumed wisdom. So by outliving the government officials, we were able to actually influence policy. It just requires you to stay alive. It's quite, and stay in the same job, of course. We also lobbied for this. We said, look, this is crazy having a science target. And why was there a science target? For the reasons I've said, but also because amongst some of our biology and chemistry colleagues, particularly biology colleagues, they said, do you know what, actually, Chris, biologists do make better teachers. They're friendlier, they're warmer, they're cuddlier, yeah? And you can teach a biologist some physics, whereas you can't make a physicist friendly. You know, it just doesn't work. So that was kind of interesting. So we said something quite rude, and we said, no, we need a separate target, because there was just a single science target. And by and large, approximately 70% were biologists being recruited, 30% were 20% were physicists, who were chemists, and then fewer again physicists. If I zip back a number of slides, you may see, forgive me if I just do this very quickly, that one. So originally, if you look at the physics blue curve here, there was that number of physicists, that number of chemists, that number of biologists. But by this approach, do you notice they artificially introduced a feedback loop? So there used to be reasonably equal numbers of physics, chemistry and biology, but the switch to science actually distorted it. So you have a few more biologists, and you certainly have a large mass of combined scientists who would largely be biologists by training and background. So that together is the kind of biology. So that was something we kept saying. We didn't think we would win this one, but there came just a particular government official who agreed with us, and we were lucky, and they said, yes, let's do that, let's go for it. It was persistence and a measure of luck. We also lobbied for there to be a combined physics with maths course, because what we had discovered was that of our precious physicists, precious physics graduates, 1/3 of them were teaching maths, and that's all they would teach, because they were unwilling to be forced to teach biology and chemistry. So again, the data, having good data, showed us this. So that was it. So we said, okay, let's give them permission to not teach biology. And that seemed to work. So the numbers went up. The last point here is interesting. This is back to the 1920s. We were lucky. We are a charity. We have a significant income. And because the government noticed that we were spending our money on physics, it then meant that they decided to help us. And that, again, is in a sense luck on our part. So they said, look, you've got a good name. You've got a good reputation in academia, at universities as well as in schools. Why don't we use your name and actually launch a scheme or two? And I'll show you some of the brochures we've got. And so this is the latest ones, but essentially the scheme would have the IMP's logo on it, and it was government money. It's pretty much 100% government money. And we were able to employ marketing people to do some nice things and to have former students as case studies and to make it look good. So we didn't do this ourselves as physicists. We actually employed marketing people. So in the Institute of Physics, only about 30–40% of us are physics graduates. We recognise that we need professionals, professional marketing, professional comms, professional press officers who do their job, and they're not supposed to be physicists. We have a few, we do it, but we do it properly and use the professionals. So this was, again, the government liked what they saw, and they said, okay, we want you to hand out 150 of these, so 300,000 euros tax-free. Yeah, this is quite big money. So the equivalent of roughly 4 million per year, obviously rather more in terms of euros-ish, 5–6-ish. And that was great. And they gave us some money a year or two down the line to run the scheme. So this is pure government money being pumped into the system to attract, they thought, higher quality candidates. They wanted to use our name to enhance the scheme's reputation. And we said, yeah, we'll do that. We'll take the money and we'll give it out. We like the sound of that because it gives us a group of 150 who we can have a closer relationship with. I was tempted to say no. Why? Because we didn't want to make a distinction between different types of people. Those who have scholarships, who are good on a particular day doing a particular exam, and those who aren't as good. And the government were particularly insistent that that the scholarships would go to those with first-class degrees and 2:1 degrees. In fact, at one point it was just first-class degrees. We managed to persuade them to let in those who had a second-class degree, a 2:1. Why? Because as far as we know, there is no research that correlates degree class with how good you are as a teacher. As far as we know, it's not correct. You have to have the subject knowledge clearly, but in terms of degree class, we couldn't see a correlation. It turned out we were able to persuade the government. They softened it, they blurred the edges, they allowed us in and to have some extra freedom, and we were able to set our own exam and hand out this money. And it's worked up to a point. Part of the difficulty is we're so busy doing this, we haven't had as much of an opportunity as we'd like to actually nurture these 150. We're now just about doing things. So it's a success story, but still a partial one. So working with the government, outliving them, keeping on asking for things which the data tells us we need to do, asking for tweaks to the system based on how the data, looking at the data again, what does the data tell us, how can we tweak things, and eventually, again, we get lucky. The government likes us and decides to work with us. So that is, if you like, the secret of success with the government. Is it good to pause there for a moment if there's any questions, or should we have them at the end? Yeah? Anything on that part? Because I've been doing a lot of talking and you haven't. And as a former teacher, this is very bad. By now you should be split into groups and be talking amongst each other and doing
I don't think so, right.
Yeah.
I understand those experiments with coordinated science, or you said combined science.
Yes.
But do you have some data how the methods of teaching affected the issue? For example, NAFED course.
Yeah.
Do you have data about this? How the type of...
No, and it's a disaster. In England, we have no professors of science or physics education. In England, there is a distinct lack of research on the effectiveness of individual methodologies. It's our shame. We have almost nothing, and we know that this is not good. We have some evidence in terms of...
NAFED course failed.
Sorry?
NAFED course failed.
The Nuffield course, I taught the Nuffield course.
Yes.
All we can say is anecdote. I don't know of any data. I would say that it helped in terms of the quality of teaching, I think.
Yes.
But in terms of hard data, I cannot quote you an evaluation. There may have been one. Things have got better since the Nuffield course in terms of evaluations. But again, what is the methodology? Do you do it in terms of the exam results? But what happens if the exams themselves are a distraction? If the exams aren't good, do you do it there are all sorts of difficulties in terms of evaluation. And we admit that we have failed. We have not done this in England. We have not looked at these interventions in the same way that other countries have done. And we are aware of a body of research in the United States and other places in Europe. We ourselves have little. It's getting better. if you have a training course in England or something like that, you have a, how do you evaluate a training course for teachers? You hand out a questionnaire at the end that says, did you enjoy the lunch? Tick. Was it well administered? Tick. Did you enjoy the day? Tick. It's a good course because they enjoyed the lunch, it was well administered, and they enjoyed the day. They thought I was a funny speaker or whatever. Or not. Yeah?
Thank you.
So that's the level of evaluation. Level number 2, has there been any change in practice in the school? That is evaluated to some extent. Tying it into the pupil data, very rarely. There is some evidence, some initiatives like Teach First, which is a teacher training initiative, have been able to track it all the way through. But it's quite rare. And we're not good at this. And we want to learn from you if you do this better than we do. Because we don't really do it well at all, in my opinion.
I think we don't.
Okay, yeah. Any other questions on this before we go? Yes.
You mentioned only the number of teachers.
Yes.
As if the number of students was exactly the same. Probably this variation in the number of teachers depends on the variation of the number of students. Probably there are some other causes who affect the variation in the number of teachers. How can I estimate that the only reasons are these?
I think that's a very fair point. The pupil population has changed, but the variation in the number of teachers is remarkable. And yes, in terms of perhaps we should do per head, the pupil-teacher ratio would be more meaningful. Yeah, I agree.
Is the birth rate increasing or decreasing? How is it possible to combine, without combining the number of teachers with the number of students and some other variables? It's very difficult to reach any conclusion.
I agree there is a weakness there. I think it's fair to say that the variations occur in the birth rate are over a longer time frame, and they are in England now. We are experiencing higher numbers. This is certainly true. And that will on its own make the shortage of physics teachers worse, even if the absolute numbers stay the same. So I accept the criticism.
And of course, if the number of students is increasing, then the problem is more serious than the one we presented.
Yeah. In terms of the variation of the number of teachers, I accept the criticism, but the sheer amount of variations in that time frame, I think the pupil numbers might have changed by maybe 5%, whereas the teacher numbers were oscillating by 100%. But I accept your point. And maybe we need to have a calibration in there as well. So I agree, but I don't think it's as significant. I don't think it explains all the differences. But I agree, it's a very fair point. Yeah.
On the other hand, if you're looking for more bad news, you could look at the age structure.
Look at these, sorry.
Age structure.
Yes,
age.
Yeah.
Because while we had a look at Austria, and physics teachers are second only to the Catholic Church.
Yeah, in terms of age. I can show you some data here. 2005 we had, there's some strange things about age. And it goes like this. The younger teachers leave faster. So if you draw a diagram in terms of like a survival curve, it goes very rapidly, almost a half leave within 5 years. And this is the same almost everywhere across Europe, almost everywhere, certainly in the English-speaking world, in Australia, Canada. And then it's roughly speaking steady. So even if you had that on its own, that will produce an interesting situation in which you will always produce predominantly older teachers because they survive. Yeah. So the age, the demographic is not just down to the aging population thing. We discovered, we were very worried. Then we realised actually it's a consequence of the attrition rates. Most teachers enter the profession early when they're young. We don't have many mature entrants. We maybe have 20-25% mature entrants. So I was surprised. And the first time I did that modelling was a year ago. And I went from thinking, we have a massive age problem, to thinking, no we don't, because it's a natural consequence of the demographics, the way it works. But it is very interesting. Our situation now is we have so many younger teachers coming in that it's actually reversed the demographic, which is quite interesting. Okay, on to working with universities. So the government's one thing, working with universities. This is important to us to actually go into university departments. What we discover, we've known for some time, is that physics departments do not talk to education departments. It just never happens. The two are completely separate cultures with a few exceptions. So if we're trying to do a recruitment event that is targeting physics undergraduates, we need some persuasion. Fortunately, at the time, Peter Main, who was a former professor, and he knew by name all of the heads of physics departments across England, so he simply meant he just phoned them up and said, we need to have a talk at your place. And then within half an hour, someone would phone back and get it sorted out. So that was just seniority, that was just, if you like, influence, and that was able to happen. We were able to recruit lecturers to advertise in their undergraduate lectures the fact there would be an event for teachers. And then we paid students quite well, the equivalent of 100 euros or more, to recruit their friends and to bring them in. We didn't really care if they bribed them with pizza or chocolates or something. We just said, bring them in. Anyway, put up various bits of notices on notice boards. And by doing that, by working together with the departments and using the students, using everybody, we are actually able to have successful events. Up to 50 undergraduates will be turning out for a recruitment event. So that is in the context of I don't know, maybe approximately 300 undergraduates. So you have a significant turnout. Those figures are very, very approximate, but we were quite surprised how well this worked. So that's important, these campus events, recruitment events. We actually help the teacher educators. Often we discovered they are isolated. Often they have the worst of all worlds, because in the education department you don't produce lots of top-level research, so you are thought of as low-life. You are not great for the university itself. What is worse, you're inspected by the university authorities and you're inspected by the external government inspectors for schools. So you actually have it, you're quite an endangered species. So we said we need to support the educators themselves, which we've done with bringing them together to reduce the isolation and increase their status, make them think that we care about them, which we do. And they have a voice to government, using us as a channel for that. So that's what we did. And this is another interesting one. I noticed again in steps 2, one of the things you were promoting was the use of parallel routes, which are very common, I think, in Europe, but not very common at all in England. And that is now new. This is big. The government is now paying us to do this. So we have a pilot project which was started by Imperial College, and I think Gareth Jones may have talked to you a bit about that. That's now used, and it's going out to maybe 5 or 10 other universities have signed up because this worked well and because these are institutions which are well respected. That now seems to be happening. So you're incorporating physics and education together in undergraduate studies. So that for us is new. For you, this is very normal. Welcome, do come in. But for us, this is new and again a bit unusual. I can't emphasise in England how strange it is to have educators in academic physics departments. I know for you this sounds crazy, but for us this is a very strange thing. Bringing the two together has been quite an effort. So governments, universities, and then directly working with students and teachers themselves. So this is important. We have the email addresses of every single undergraduate physicist. That is very powerful because we give them free membership to the Institute of Physics if they part with their email address. That means we can do direct mailing to them and we are envied. The mathematicians are really envious this. The mathematics societies in England do not work together very well and they certainly don't have access to the email addresses of undergraduates. But we are fortunate in being able to do that. Again, it's down to luck in 1920. We're able to attend these various recruitment events and we're also able to do direct mentoring. Back about 8-10 years ago we started this scheme. We said, look, there are certain types of teachers who are particularly vulnerable to dropping out. Particularly those who come in as mature students. Often they have families, they cannot move very far, they cannot select the school they will teach in, they don't have much choice. That means they tend to go to schools that perhaps they wouldn't like to teach in, tougher schools, more difficult schools, and we found that mature students, mature people coming into teaching later in life, they drop out very fast, even faster than before. So we said we need to do something to support them. So we were able to do that. We took them to conferences, we paid their hotel bills. Fortunately, the Gatsby Foundation is owned by Lord Sainsbury. Lord Sainsbury's runs a very large supermarket chain in England. His net worth is £1 billion. He decided to give away £1 billion in his lifetime. Yeah, he is a very generous man indeed. And part of that £1 billion came to us. Not very much actually, about a few million. But actually a few million is quite nice, even on its own. And it made those teachers feel loved and respected. We took them to conferences and we provided them with extra support. It didn't stop them in some ways dropping out, but at least it made it better than it might have been otherwise. Yeah, so it turns out that the government thought that was a good idea, and we were able to persuade them ultimately to fund it when the supermarket money ran out. So that was good. We made a bit of progress in that. Okay, so that was the situation, the gloom when I started, and I'm not taking credit for this because it certainly wasn't just me. Look at those economic variations. But there is, having said that, I think it's fair to say with those various measures we did have some kind of effect. And accepting what the colleague here is saying about the pupil numbers, that is roughly what happened. So it was higher than it has ever been in any historic records from that point onwards. And that was a very good year. We celebrated. The government was listening to us, the scholarships were working, the physics with maths courses were working, the marketing was working, everything was working. I thought this is great. And all we need to do is carry on like that for another 10 years and we'll be all right. Yeah? Because we've still got quite a big attrition rate. But we reckon in 10 years' time we should be able to get there. So this is great. And I think it's fair to say that variation, the variation in the number of pupils is significantly less than that. That would have been over that year a few percent, whereas it's very significant. But that dip there I can come back to. And again, that was a change in government policy. Disaster. So you don't win them all. You don't win every battle. But I can come back to that if you have time at the end. Again, this is a model for the number of physics teachers, approximately speaking, and it seems to be that we've probably just exceeded that. This is not definitive because I said the data isn't good enough, but that is our best guess. And we think it's probably better than it has been, and it's going up. And what we want to do is we want to run a simulation, we want to run a situation in which we take a group of pupils and we see if they are taught by a consistent group of physics specialists throughout their life as pupils. And does that make a difference? Having an unbroken succession of physics specialists, does that actually help? There being no gaps. Because if you think about it, if there's a single gap in the specialist, if someone puts them off, they're lost, they drop the subject. So if you think about it, the fraction of physics teachers who are specialists doesn't completely explain the numbers going on to do the subject, because one failure knocks them out of the system. Yeah. So that's the interesting factor here, and we'd like to do that research. We haven't got there yet, but we'd like to do it. Okay, where do we go for extra physics teachers? Part of it is engineers. This is an analysis of where the physics teachers come from. Most of them are physics degrees, some astrophysics down here, and then these are engineers, other sciences, and then we have a significant number of engineers. They will, engineers are an interesting group. Some of them are allowed to come in straight away. That may be right, that may be wrong, but they're allowed to come in. Others do go through retraining courses. And we discovered some interesting things. Yeah, the sheer number of engineers is completely dwarfs the number of physicists. Our government is slightly obsessed with this group, which is understandable. And they have launched seven separate schemes in the last year have been announced by our Prime Minister David Cameron at the cost of £67 million. And they all focus on that group. People who've left and they try and persuade to come back. They try and get people aged 16 and bribe them, reward them to become physics teachers by giving them money throughout universities. All sorts of different schemes are being proposed. And we are saying fundamentally, that's crazy. That's a very limited pool of people. This is an enormous pool, and they basically have all done some form of teaching, some form of A-level physics in the past. We need to have conversion courses that top that up. So that is, for us, again, just looking at the stats. And engineers at the moment go into maths, they go into technology teaching, and some of them go into physics, but by no means all. So we're trying various things with engineers. One of them is a marketing campaign. So this was, we asked the engineers and they said this kind of kit approach, that they seem to like that. We did some focus group works with trial groups of students and that seemed to go down well. And again, we visit campuses. And this is a new one. Some of you may be aware that there are very many undergraduate projects that can be done. In England, undergraduates can go and work on a vast number of different competitions, some involving F1 racing, a whole series of competitions. And what we've said is, why don't you come into schools and do some of that work? And maybe some of them will get hooked, maybe some of them will get drawn into teaching by doing this outreach work in schools. So that's an idea that we're going to work and try and partner with the engineering faculties to get people into schools. That's a new idea. Okay, so we talked a bit about the big problem in physics with girls, various recruitment strategies, some of which have worked well, some of which haven't worked quite so well, some of it we've been lucky about, some of them we've been forced by the government. And this last one, I'll spend a little bit less time on this one. Interventions by the government, and I guess many of you can relate to this. I won't say a great deal about it, other than that's the kind of picture that we get. The government footballing squad effectively comes onto the pitch. Occasionally they do good things, but by and large government ministers have a habit of scoring down ideas on backs of envelopes in a taxi somewhere in London, and they hand it to one of their colleagues, one of their junior members of staff, and say, please could you go and implement this idea. So a lot of it is because of political fashion. It's fair to say that the previous minister in charge of education, Michael Gove, the good thing about him was that he liked physics and chemistry. He was well taught in Scotland by various teachers, and he liked them as a subject, and he respected our professionalism. The difficulty about Michael Gove as an education minister, very influential, is he hated university teacher trainers. So he said, why don't we get the teachers to train other teachers in the schools? I mean, we can involve the universities a bit, but effectively trying to cut off the supply of money, with the result that numbers of departments of education in universities have stopped. The Open University has stopped. University of Bath has stopped teacher education. University of Kiel has effectively stopped. And numbers of universities have stopped teacher education because of this attitude. Because we think, and we don't know, but we think that he was heavily influenced by a few bad experiences. And anyway, it's fairly true to say that there's been a massive change in government policy, and that has not helped us at all. I can mention a few others. Some details here. Again, the structure of A-levels was changed. They introduced a new grading scale. They didn't think that A to F was good, so they decided that 1 to 9 was better than A to F, in reverse order. And that standards have been slipping, therefore we'd have to boost everything up. And they decided that, in fact, that practical exams had some malpractice. People were cheating on practical exams, so we should remove them altogether and do something else altogether. It's not the specific ones that matter, it's the fact that in England education is still a very political thing. And we want to remove it from the region of politics, back to the region of data and research and best practice. One of the solutions that has been proposed is a Royal College of Teachers, to take away the control of the curriculum from the government altogether, and to have, as the doctors have, and as the lawyers have, as other professions have, a college of teachers. And our own Prince Charles is particularly interested in this. Not everyone likes Prince Charles, some do, some don't. There is a distinct variation in thought as to whether it should be a Royal College of Teachers or just a College of Teachers. But anyway, the problem is subject specialists won't be there. It will be about general teaching issues. And the other thing is, teachers don't want to join. They've already paid out a certain amount to a union. They may pay out some kind of insurance. And by and large, our experience in the past has shown this doesn't work. We had something called, there's two things we have. In Scotland, they have a very successful General Teaching Council of Scotland. It works. It regulates well. It is well thought of. In England, we try to do the same. So we changed the name Scotland to England, but then changed everything else as well. And so we had a General Teaching Council of England, which with all due respect did almost nothing, expended a lot of money, and in the end the government decided to kill it off. So we have a bad example, we have a bad track record, we have bad history, unfortunately. So with all that, we are not sure there will ever be enough money to make this work. We think it's doomed to failure from the outset, unless something very radical changes. So we decided to do something very pragmatic as the Institute of Physics. We're going to go direct to the teachers and do something quite different. And that's my last point here. We actually are in a situation now where we can effectively mobilise the teachers and work with them individually in a number of ways. When I started at the Institute 13 or so years ago, there were 5 of us. So we couldn't deal with 10,000 teachers. What could we deal with? If we were lucky, we could deal with 3,500 secondary schools. All our schemes, when I started, were school-based schemes. Now that we have more capacity, we can actually work and switch to individual teachers. And some of this is very simple and straightforward. It's a database that works. Now, you might have thought that databases have been around for quite a few years. But as an Institute of Physics, we got databases terribly wrong for our members. I mean, we do have members, we keep them, we do renew their subscriptions. But actually, we've had significant internal problems with our database. Incredibly expensive, not particularly good. And we're probably on now about the 3rd one since I've been here around. So something as simple as the choice of a database structure set us back maybe 15 years. But we've now got one, finally we've got one that appears to work and is capable and uses an industry standard platform called Salesforce that everyone uses, certainly in England, and probably it's a worldwide product. If you've probably been pestered by any form of mail at the post or phone calls, it's probably down to a Salesforce run database system, I imagine. So that gives us, if you like, an infrastructure to make things work. But there's no point having the teachers' details unless we have the moral right to have that. We have to do things for them. We have to give them certain things. And one of the things we do is various user forums, similar to Twitter, similar to Facebook, similar to various other social media forums, where people can pose questions and hopefully get some good answers back from other teachers. By and large, 80% of people listen. About 20% of people, or 19% of people, contribute quite a bit. And 1% or so are the super users who are out there all the time. It's approximately a reciprocal curve in terms of how much people contribute on a forum and how often they do it. But that's fine. If 80% just sit and listen, that's okay. Diagnostic testing. Can we actually go down and get individual data on individual teachers and what they can do? Well, we can't yet do their pedagogy, but at least we're making a start on their subject knowledge. And we've now got, again, a platform. And it's down to just getting the right platform to work, where we can set them a series of questions, or that they look at the questions and they try to improve their subject knowledge. So they use this as a private thing. This is not a shame thing where we publicly say, you got 3 out of 10 on this. We're trying to get introduced to something they trust us with, so that they will learn and they will be able to take sufficient courses to improve their own subject knowledge. Once the community trusts us that we're not going to shame people publicly, then and then only will we start to make it available as something where they can take the tests in a secure environment and they can get certification, as you would have with a Microsoft product. Any one of us can go online and we can take a Word or an Excel exam and you can print out a certificate on your wall saying, I'm a Microsoft trainer. We can all do that even now, if you like. Yeah? So that is possible, but we want that, but only once it's accepted. What we don't want is the Institute of Physics having a bad reputation and we're always telling people off. They're useless. Now, some of them do have very poor subject knowledge, unfortunately, but we want to help them improve that in a way that works and is good psychologically. And there's various other resources that we've got here for remediation. Okay, so that's our kind of system, and I realise time is pressing on very rapidly. So this is roughly a summary of what we do. We try and talk to government and be there. We try to outlive them. We use media to provoke opinion changes, but it has to be based on education research. We have to base it. We have to have resources available. They have to tackle pedagogy as well as subject knowledge. I have mentioned about careers, but we also have careers advice and various newsletters. And we work with a large community of teachers. We try and work locally. Again, there's not time to say about that. Mentoring I have referred to in social media. The last point here is at the moment, we talk about networks. We don't really have networks. What we have is hub and spoke works. We have central things, experts who talk to others. We would like to see the birth of genuine networks of interconnection where there's a lot more people helping each other. So we'd like to move from hub and spoke, centre and perimeter, to actual networks. We're getting there, but we're still in the early days. So that is our overall strategy. Various things illustrated. That is the extent of our field force. We're lucky to be able to employ about 100 people. Of those, maybe about 20 full-time, and some of them about a tenth, half a day a week or so. Big publications and various websites. We get numbers of hits. So those are our kind of strategies and how we try to make things work. So not a comprehensive thing, but hopefully by taking those three things, it gives you a flavour of what we've been able to achieve. Some of it by persistence, some of it by luck, and sometimes luck's worked against us. But that's essentially how we proceeded over the last few years as a team together. So, and we're still learning. We still need to do things. We're still getting things wrong. I think. We still don't have the best data. But we're getting there gradually. I think my time is up. Is there time for yes?
Yes. Is there any gap between the average income of physics teachers and those who follow other professions?
Teachers, by and large, are not as well paid in physics. Yes, there is.
Why do you expect people to go to the teaching profession and become poorer and poorer?
Yeah. We cannot. Yes, it's a massive problem. They are hanging on by their fingernails. The interesting thing is that we think that most people don't go into teaching for the money, but money helps. And
money makes the work go round.
Yeah, but sometimes this is the way
I teach. Yeah. I wouldn't work in England because of the low salary.
Yeah.
So
the government cannot. The government has toyed with the idea, but again, it is too expensive to raise. In our culture, the government considers that the wage bill,
especially those other professions who come to the teaching profession, is because they are not so successful in their own profession. Otherwise, they wouldn't come to become teachers.
Yeah.
So these are the real problem.
Yeah, I would say I agree with you partially. It is a problem. We haven't run the experiment. All we know is that there are some very, very wealthy bankers who have stopped doing their jobs and become teachers because they got, even though they were earning £100,000, not many, but some of them did because they said there's more to life. But I admit that is at the 1% level or the 0.1% level. So I admit it's an anecdote, and the plural of anecdote is not data. So, yeah.
If you increase the salaries, we can export teachers from Cyprus to work in England.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you have quite a sample of engineers going into
Yes.
teaching. How is the salary situation with those? Do they in general take a cut and so on?
That's a very interesting question.
No, if they
I
don't
think
find the
if
job.
they were mature, yes, they probably do. The younger ones, the gap is not so much at the younger age.
Yeah, because I know some people who say, well, in teaching I get more direct satisfaction than when I'm working on.
Yeah, yeah. It's a problem, and we have to work with that. Yeah.
We have a database.
Yeah.
For this insight in the situation in England and how especially IT is trying to help and to make programs improve things, and I think there are several points we can include in our discussions today and tomorrow. So thank you again.
Can I
And
ask,
now we have
can I ask questions? It's too late.
No, one last question.
So, just 3 points. One,
You're asking during coffee.
First, thank you so much. Done. One is a clarification. I don't understand what means resources as concern carriers. Can you explain me a little bit what means? In the law.
Okay, resources.
First. Second, I asked you some words as concern Imperial College model, because it's not well known.
Okay.
And last but not least, what role have teacher education research, and in particular the role of Teacher Center in New York?
Okay. So resources in Imperial York. Resources would be websites, printed materials, things like that. So we cover age 11 to 19 in terms of websites, materials people can download and use straight away, some of them directly with pupils, exercises materials, mainly teacher training materials, materials on misconceptions, on forces, electricity, all those things. So those are kind of resources, and there's a selection of them here if you want to have a look at. You're very welcome to take these. These are all for you. That's physics and football. That's been quite an interesting one. That's very popular with schools. We've got some major England clubs, or what passes as major England clubs in England. Working with us. So that's Arsenal, for example. You may not have heard them. Yeah, that's quite fun. And various newsletters. So by all means, help yourself to these. We have millions more, well, hundreds more back at the IOP. And you're very welcome to look at those resources that we find. Yeah. Imperial, simply that they have a 3-year course and a 4-year course, and they were doing education modules as a part of that. So by the time they graduate, they have a qualified teacher status as well as a degree. This is new to us. I know lots of you do this, but for us that's a new scheme. We haven't done this before. In terms of the education in York, yes, it is very good. They are specialists in a number of areas, not least in diagnostic questions. Robin Miller is I think, a leading authority in that. York is still linked to the Salters organisation, another charity, and so they have a substantial research output. So yeah, particularly Mary Whitehouse and Robin Miller are well known in the science field, at least for their work. And diagnostic questions in particular. So it is Robin's opinion that the best thing any of us can do is to produce better questions. He seriously, there is some argument that actually says the best thing we can always do is really good diagnostic questions for subject knowledge for teachers and for pupils. But that's an interesting point.
Okay, so thank you again. So we started earlier, and now I think we have to close. But if there are any questions, there will be now a break. And so also in the break, I think you can ask please. And so we'll have a break till 4:30. Thank you.
But the point was that.
Oh yes. Yes.
Like, I understand why, because it's like,
So,
they can get direct access to the
side, yes, start, and
he's thinking too much because
they will attract, yeah, many
I think just practice.
no, we have to change this.
It's just a suggestion by me, privacy. Okay. So write Marek and him together and ask them what happens on your suggestions and so on, and if something can be done for helping. Okay.
Okay. Good. Let's go. Yes. They can play. Now we got this. Now I don't know in Italy for stories, but in Spain they are close in the high position of senior, and they don't give the team the places for you to have
For this one,
yeah. Oh, yes.
uvijek mora biti kabula. Samo ne dodati torbu da ja sad ne idem unutra.
Sigurno to ja nisam pitao. Nastavljamo sad.
Mislim da je možda imamo opet isti taj.
To izgleda kao nekakav mini.
Moram imati, jer to uvijek imam. Zapravo ne. Uvijek imam sa sobom. Možda i je negdje u torbi, ali nema veze.
A imate i ovaj, ja sam danas bio u Labosu koristili ovako štopnicu. Ima da je tam stalno upaljen i onda sam nisam razočaran. Pozdravljeno, super, pravo.
Samo mi ostavite tamo. Ovo ima mikro i mini. To je jedna od boljih investicija. Ne treba često, ali kad treba onda. Čak nije ni ružan prije. Sigurno što imam njom.
A to je ovaj tijek.
Quella pezzette non è una frase di questionnaire, una usa catalana, sai che non si parla un po'. L'altra comanda e c'è, j'espère che je viens avec ses mains.
po' precisa, quando la fase è così. Ah, che mi era di distanza. È così, non te lo sai. Vedrai il pugnetto.
No, lo sto dicendo perché adesso ha scoperto Alex, hello. I think you're I wanted to know faces to so I just say to I came with my hands. No, but of course now we will but I just begin start from zero. Yes. Okay, so I will
Actually, Leopold instructions for what thing actually can work will start tomorrow. During that time, everyone has to decide which side goes. Because we will make two of the
okay, I have changed the website and so you
e ti guarda con speranza e tu devi prendere.
Ci sono dei caffè spesso, no? Io lavoro per meno
Sì, sì, faccio una bella dieta. A me non piace, a me no.
malo, ako mi dodate moj problem, to se meni to napiše Manhattan. Manhattan Projects. Da. Jel možete pogledati, čini mi se da nije povezano.
The first stop, they got inside in a country a little bit far away. It is also a tradition to invite people, persons from the host country to get information, to get insight what's going on in this country where we are with respect to physics education. And I'm happy that Professor Miroslav Furić takes over this job. Professor Furić is already Professor Emeritus, and I have to say that we know each other for a long time because in our former lives we both were nuclear physicists. So Miro also was energy physics. There was one difference. I was on the theoretical side and Miro was on the experimental side. He made wonderful experiments on bioresonances, nuclear resonances. Okay, but this was the former level. But now we are in physics education, and Professor Furić also has a lot of experience in this. He wrote textbooks, he was president of the Association of Teachers in Croatia. So please, Miro, now about physics teacher crisis. Again, a little bit of crisis, but then we will listen to Croatian maybe. Please.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is a real pleasure to be here with you because I was linked to UPenn project for almost 15 years. I mean, UPenn and its followers. So I'm very happy to see some old friends, but I'm also happy to see new people who will carry on this activity in the future time. The talk has two components. I will mention a few things about physics teachers' education crisis in general, because it transcends borders of Western world countries. And then, of course, as Leopold has said, I will talk also about Croatian angle in this respect. Now, I have chosen to quote several highly relevant sources. Cornell University has official statement that United States faces a shortage of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics professionals, and they relate this to the critical shortage of physics teachers in high schools. And therefore, they conclude that America lags behind their competitors. I have a small surprise for Dr. Chairperson. He did not tell one important piece of news. He knows who is George Osborne. George Osborne is the #2 man in the United Kingdom's government. And what he did, he has announced that he will give those who finish these in mathematics and physics, they will give them double salary to those which are normally given to people when they enter the teacher's profession. There is a small addition to that which I somehow skipped to write it down, and that is he has also promised that those who enter will have a chance to develop further in the profession. Then there is also a statement from Germany, Deutsche Physikalische Gesellschaft, and this is again a quote. Education in science and particularly physics shapes young people for their whole lifetime. So it is the basis on which they construct their picture of the world. And Germans are not satisfied with the education structure presently. Now, I dared to repeat some really tough issues which physics teachers face. The first sentence, that physics is the mother of all sciences, that you do not dare to tell in front of chemists, biologists, and other scientists. But, you know, what I meant here, physics supplies young person with the constituents of the world, with its interactions, and then it builds layers. Quark level, nuclear level, atomic level, molecular level, and so on. So it is really setting up mindsets. Weltanschauung in Germany. And physics also requires mathematical skills. It develops very specific physicist intuition. And just as the student grabs the physics intuition, he has to surrender to extremely non-intuitive physical facts like quantum effects. That is for the physicists by themselves. But then, physics teacher has to face fundamental didactic issues. There is bifurcation. Should he go along Piaget concept, constructivism, or he should base his lecture on axiomatic approach? I would maybe give as an anecdote, our physics teachers are in a really surprising situation. Namely, the man who was in charge of physics teachers' education, he was adoring Piaget concepts. And that is how he formed physics teachers. Then they came into the classroom and all the textbooks were written along the line of the axiomatic approach. Now, we know that especially in states, but also in other countries, there are elaborate findings how to perform modern teaching and learning in schools. So, the physics teachers have so many challenges to face, and then society awards all such efforts with shamefully low salaries. Many years ago, I have asked myself, why would a young person which has talent, which has enthusiasm, in their official publication, a suggestion. If the physics teacher has a certain volume of time, give him maybe 10% or so a chance to be involved in some research project or in some community project. And in that way, enable him to have some chance for some real personal development. Well, even here in UPenn, my British colleagues did not look at that with big enthusiasm, but I am now very happy that George Osborne, the person number 2, is offering those who come with PhDs a chance to further develop professionally.
Who is number 1?
Ah, George Cameron. We can look at the problem from another angle. Physics teacher has to have 2 complementing components. One is he has to pass tough, dedicated physics modules, and he has to pass modules of physics-related teacher training. That means the guy which is studying in research direction, he has full time for his professional development, and the guy who will teach physics, he has to give up part of the time in order to pass physics-related teacher training. Then, if students look among themselves, and our department controls both sides. At our department, then those who will be professionals in physics, they look down on those who will be teachers of physics. Furthermore, there are other possible choices which he has to make. I don't know how many of you have looked at Professor Levin's lectures at MIT. Now, I think he is a champion of how you teach physics with charm. And you can do it also in high school. You can use smart boards, and there are some other things which I call generically gadgetry. Now, there is one very important issue. In the United States, there is at least 1 year-long discussion if you should perform real experiments in the classroom. And they are inclined more and more to so-called virtual laboratory, meaning that they will display on the screen how the experiment works and use this as a kind of instrument in teaching physics. Then there is, of course, also internet. So, physics teacher has many issues, many choices to make, and it is not easy life for them. Now, about situation in Croatia, I'm just trying to give you an impression how we have historically developed. The first higher education lecture was in 1662. That was also the beginning of University of Zagreb. In 1772, Newtonism was first taught at University of Zagreb. Now, in 1874, we have received very significant help because from Prague, Vinko Dvorak came to Zagreb, and he was embedded in the European physics research space, which means that he was in correspondence with leading leading physicists of his time. In 1909, Mohorić was discovered by geophysicist Mohorić. That is there within Earth's interior. And what I liked very much is I read high school textbooks, this one around 1938. A professor who wrote the textbook, he quoted universe expansion as a big mystery. That was the end of the book. I find that deeply surprising because Big Bang was not yet in fashion at that time. Now, what is our experience in enrollment issues? After the war in Croatia, there was real poverty. That was sort of fortunate for our physics department because government has built Institute Witkowski, which was exceptional attractor for scientists. I wouldn't like to discuss why this institute was erected, but that was for us poor, fast way out of poverty. By 1970s, things have changed drastically. We have got a Minister of Education who disliked generic knowledge. His enemies joked about him that he would teach one class how to make a left shoe and how to make the right shoe. That would be a second class. So he was very much emphasizing special production knowledge instead of generic knowledge. And we had to fight back. We couldn't do it politically, but we were asking prominent professors to lecture to high school students. In addition, we got friends, physicists who worked with us and were linked to NASA. So they gave us NASA movies. We had received some materials, and this was the way how we were attracting students at this critical time. Recently, you will see an illustration. There is one man who has organized such a spectacular public show. I'll show you the figure in a few seconds. Then we have students, sometimes also professors, but mostly students, who travel with Physics Express. This is a minibus which demonstrates inspiring experiments to high school kids. Then our university has a show of professions. Every department shows what their students are capable of doing. And we are present there, of course. Every year, and you will see illustrations, about 1,000 visitors pass our labs and auditorium, seeing our spectrum of activities. Then, our high school kids participate in physics Olympics and international physics competition. One of them was held here in Zagreb a few years ago. And I should have also added, you probably have heard of that, in August, there will be an international conference of physics students here in Croatia. So as you see, department, Croatian Physical Society and our students, we are doing all sorts of tricks in order to increase the enrollment in physics. Okay, the man here is shown from the back and he sits right close to the door in the second row. Here is this gentleman. He will entertain you more on Saturday. And the demonstration was really spectacular. Here is the famous sphere. You probably still remember that famous experiment. There is a vacuum within the sphere. Sphere has two halves, which are held together by the atmospheric pressure. And then there are 8 horses trying to pull the thing apart. Of course, they fail. Then they let the air flow in, and of course the thing falls practically by itself. This man has organized this spectacular show, and he is a member of our department.
But There were 12 courses.
Oh, sorry about that.
How many originally in Magdeburg?
16.
16.
Yes.
Okay, this is so-called this is so-called open day at our department. As I have said, about 1,000 people pass through our building. Here is one group which enters the auditorium. They will receive a general lecture, and then they will be divided into smaller subgroups, which will then be entertained, like this balloon, or there will be a video, acoustic show, and they also go and look at our electron microscope, our squid device, and other things which are active at our department. Okay, here we have Physica Express. That is the minibus which travels around, and the rector has awarded this team for doing just that. What they do, here is, for example, nitrogen bottle, and you can do all sorts of things by demonstrating change in materials. Then there is gas flowing, then there are holes, and you see the flames, and of course, if there would be no sound, the shape, the shape here would be flat. Then, if you have a single frequency, it will be sinusoidal, but if you have some general music, then you have a shape like this. 1 month ago, we had asked our teacher fundamental questions. We had asked them, what was their motivation to become a physics teacher? And as you can see, bulk of the answers goes around two things. They love to transfer science accomplishments. They love the importance of education in physics. They also like to work with young people. It is very surprising that they were neglecting personal affirmation in society, and they were not caring so much about long salaries. Second question was, what is society's most important factor securing the quality of education? Now look at this. First, policies of Ministry of Education and so-called Agency for Education, it is less than a quarter. Schools educating the future teachers and professors in our schools, they also do not receive favorable grade. I will warn you that this contradicts answers in the next question. What they are highly enthusiastic is themselves. They believe that their work at the school and they themselves, they secure the quality of education. They do not regard students' predisposition or family background as very important. And the third question, how to change and improve? What is the fastest way? Government places the slogan, simplify the curriculum. Only 9%. Look at this. This is in contradiction what they said before, thinking poorly about their professors. Should they change the way the teachers are educated? Only 10%. Now, as you can see, the highest links to advancing and developing existing teachers. That is what they believe is the important thing, and also award them financially. There is another slogan here, and it involves work with gifted pupils. And as you see, our physics teachers are not very favorable about that. Well, Walter Cronkite, extremely popular US government, would say, that's the way it is, May 2015, here in Zagreb. Conclusion. We have seen that leading countries recognize the importance of physics education. They really do. Here is one thing which maybe I was not discussing very thoroughly here at all, but I wanted to emphasize it. As professor asked in this discussion, statuses and circumstances certainly vary over to Europe. Some are reasonably paid, some are not. And I don't think if we are going to give some recipe to the European Union, we should not neglect these differences. Of course, local results in physics teacher doctrine may improve. I would still say one thing. Personally, most that I have learned and mostly that I really got in my mind was those sleepless nights when I was fighting myself between the concepts which I was just learning and the experiments that I saw being performed in front of my eyes. So, yes, novel results, but I would never kick out experiments from the teaching in classroom. I also have cum grano salti.
Salis.
Huh?
Salis.
Okay. I wrote it here correctly in English, I hope. Novel gadgetry. You see, producers are extremely keen to sell smart boards, clickers. Maybe can remember a very interesting lecture from a British professor a few years ago about the use of clickers in the classroom. So there are things, but I personally believe that this has to be taken with a measure. Then our physics teachers are obviously committed to transfer physics to pupils. They are really enthusiastic. They feel that they are the most important factor which secures the quality of this specific topic. They require their own professional development. They want to be professionally developed. They want to advance, and they require adequate financial support. That's all, folks, and I do thank you.
Thank you very much for this overview. First, the international and then the Croatian angle. Is there some question? Please.
I'd like to few words about general topics of ours. First, general topics, how to promote physics in our society. And every speaker hasn't spoken about social physics. We understand to teach physics is to consider physics to be implied with huge devices, huge installations, or about very large quantity of information. But what about females? They are not attracted by such arguments. Look at the
their wishes, their intentions to study. It is 21% for physics, 7% for informatics. That means they are not attracted by such topics, and 2 times more for biology. Why? Because biology is much closer to them. The women, the men, are much more delicate, much more implied in our neighbor environment. So we have to study to introduce sociophysics from the beginning. One way is from the very beginning to ask students, try to find and give examples from your life. For example, third Newton's law, action and reaction. Explain that. That means rights and obligations, demand and offer, quality and cost, and so on. And ask them next time with examples. You will see how many of them will be implied in looking around them, coming with examples. Here we have from the beginning ask the students to understand dimensions in physics. For example, we have set here salary. What is the salary? It is 20,000 pounds per year, but it is per year. Because if you do not say that, 20,000 may be per month, which is the average income of an officer of the International Football Association in Geneva. But it's 12 times more. So we have to use in every situation exact dimensional computation. Units have to correspond to the quantity. Much more. We have to introduce from the beginning, if possible with pupils, averages and errors. Because we think at the beginning the behavior to be compared with an idea. Never. Behavior has to be compared with some average error in the society. And for example, the bribe at the PT level, the bribe at the governmental level. I'll give an example. In Romania...
Okay, so sorry to interrupt you because what you are doing
No, it's very important.
What we should do tomorrow, you see? Because you already give examples and you give proposals what we should do. And I think this is more or less what we should do tomorrow.
Introduce in the faculty, to introduce in the master, or in training the teachers of physics, sociophysics, to be able to introduce from the school sociophysics. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. One question over here.
I would like to confirm whether I took 2 important messages from your talk. One is for the teachers to be professional, to offer them opportunities to develop, and from this point of view, should not be treated as passive consumers of research findings. These things are important from my own perspective.
Yeah.
Just one remark I cannot retain. You said it was important that you go to the schools and tell them what the students are doing. Why don't you try to have the students explain to the pupils what they're doing? It takes some training, but in the end it works better.
Okay. Other questions? So if not, then let's end. So our 2 speakers already referred to the past. So you talk about the Broadband, so European Physics Education Network. There is several times mentioned in our work in steps 2. So all know that hope emerged out of steps 2, and I think it's very important that we are still very aware what was going on, that many things that went on there, and we are very lucky because several persons who were in charge in SEPS 2 are still within us and are working with us. One of them is Professor Vitoratos, and he will give you an insight, show us some results out of SEPS 2, but also gives hints how we should go. Please.
Thank you, dear colleagues. Dear Leopold. I will present some previous work done by previous networks. And during this presentation, we will identify some points that need more analysis and more research. In a research, graduate students were asked to discuss and tabulate their best and worst learning experiences. Students did not mention of particular topics, but they particularly focused on instructors' enthusiasm, interest in the students' learning, and encouragement to support their learning. This was published in American Physical Society News, not very far from this day. Okay, the emphasis of the HOPE network for the third year is given to the subject of physics teacher education, and this working group is dedicated to this research. I started about 10 years ago, in 2006, when steps 1, it has not 1 because we did know that it will be another after that, steps 2, started to study the point of the gap, if there is gap, between high school and university and the training of physics teachers. Some findings that characterize the situation, which still exists, was the great shortage of qualified physics teachers in high schools in many European countries, a general decrease in the number of students enrolling in physics, and of course, the widely accepted fact that teacher quality influences students' choice on what they wish to study, and university has to understand what is happening in schools in order to find solutions for the problems I mentioned before, and some others. Recommendations. University physics departments should play a more proactive role in organizing in-service training courses for physics teachers. Physics departments must update physics teachers' knowledge and skills. How to invent manners for interaction with education departments
in physics teacher training and must bridge the gap between high schools and universities using a variety of methods and interaction activities. Another group of recommendations has to do with more time. More time for guidance of the first year students. More time in order to explain basic concepts. More guidance, extra tutorials, extra time from problem solving. If one has to express with one word these recommendations, he could say that the dominant parameter is time. Time for education, time for interaction between students and teachers. Then we pass to 2008 with steps 2. Main characteristic of this network was the holistic investigation of the issue of physics teacher education. That means focusing at primary school level, because it is widely accepted that the teacher, the young student, let's start from the young child, develops a favorite attitude towards physics if the student who first introduced the subject was a charismatic teacher. Sorry, I said student, the teacher. So, some research work was done for primary school, at primary school level, at secondary school level, and at the university level, with emphasis to upper secondary school level. The outcomes are written in this book. Perhaps many of you have this, yes, and Urban has in front of him, of 131 pages. And a look at the contents. The material which is more interesting for this working group and this subject, the subject of this working group, is at the third part of the book, where it is mentioned physics teacher education in each European dimension. Also, you see European benchmarks for physics teaching degrees, which were written, and the work, it's the result of the work done by Urban and the team of Mohorić. More precisely, the main activities of the group of that network was data collection on physics education at all levels, data collection for initial training and in-service training, recommendations for benchmarks for physics teacher training programs, identification of good practice in building physics teacher competences, systems of professional evaluation of physics teachers, in-service training, reasons for physics teacher shortages, and so on. Starting from the university level, I decided to mention some comments and recommendations which were found from this research, and it was the research found that a number of best practice should be for previous experience. What we mean when we say we need practice of teaching and former experience of a person which is appointed as a university professor. Everybody says, I have previous experience, I have practice in teaching, but what is exactly meant with this statement? Has he taught a subject independently, or he has participated into laboratory work helping the student? Some points have to be need more clarification. Second, are courses directed to improve teaching competences of academic staff. Some universities have such courses, and some examples of good practice would help the whole issue. Also, a definite, a precise definition of evaluation mechanism and evaluation frequency of teaching staff would be help, would help. This is the same slide. I have added at the bottom the need of tuning these procedures, and this is a need, of course. Now at the secondary school level, this is a graph of the percentage of physics lessons taught by a teacher with a specialization in physics in various European countries. For Hungary, we have not that. Does not mean that it's zero. We need a variation. There are countries in which the professors at high school have physics qualification or physics diploma, but there are other countries in which teachers have, let's say, chemistry diploma or informatics and teach physics in high school. And this combined with the next one, this diagram gives the percentage of countries who have shortage or no having shortage in Europe. Identify the crucial point of the problem. Some comments and recommendations. From all the discussion, previous discussion in the network, the need for adoption of best practice in a number of issues. became evident, and the collaboration with the working group 1 lead to the European benchmark for physics teaching degrees. Some solutions proposed, for example, the possibility for future physics teachers to be trained both in physics and in another subject could help to reduce both the problem of teaching of physics by teachers without a training in physics, as well as the problem of shortages in physics teachers. You have that these two routes for physics to become a physics teacher, the sequential and parallel. In both these routes for physics teacher training, the essential requirement is that teachers acquire competences of a good physics teacher, and this is a problem for this network also. Concerning in-service training, everybody, if you ask, have you in your country a kind of in-service training, everybody answered yes. But there are great differences concerning this procedure. In some countries are on weekends, or in evening lessons, or during the holidays, and so there is a need for tuning, for identification of the issue. There are some examples of good practice. We discussed extensively, for example, what happens in Centrum of University of Antwerp, okay? And of course there are in other universities. The problem with the information about is that usually universities use their native language, not English, in the internet. And this restricts the approach to this material. Okay, concerning the shortage, we had a nice speech before. It must be recognized that the main way to address the shortage is to make the teaching profession attractive for physics graduates. Recommendations: improvement of the social status and salaries of physics teachers. Proposals. Improvement funding for better laboratory and information and technology equipment. Enhancing the enthusiasm toward physics for physics teachers and students. This is the most difficult. Better education, as well as teacher practice in order to increase future physics teachers' self-confidence. A physics teacher must have self-confidence to enter the laboratory and start performing experiments. Enhancing possibilities for employment, advertising physics teacher jobs. And of course, some countries have, we asked if in your country there are some initiatives in order to answer this problem of shortage of physics teachers. And we also had before two speeches about And of course, this is far away from the data that colleagues from Croatia showed us in England. But it seems that governments recognize the problem. Now some words for primary school physics teachers. In the majority of European countries, the common training route for primary school science teachers is a university degree in pedagogy. Respondents claimed that there were problems related to science education in primary school, which are related to the social status, poor infrastructure for laboratory work, few hours of training in teaching science, sometimes lack of pupils' interest, and of course, here we have the constructivistic teaching strategies, which we think that may make the field better because they stress observation and of course they stress both speaking and writing activities. Some courses also for in-service training taught by physics teachers or staff with profound interest in physical phenomena and health. It's about the same. Okay. After further work has been done, and some of it is possible for everyone of you to access, and we will try to put it on the site. For example, about mobility of physics teachers, about strategies for physics education, written by Peter Soy. Factors underlying the shortage of physics teachers in England and Wales. Now, today, we have a new an early communication at the Helsinki Forum from video and concerning in-service training last year. Special attention to the benchmarks for physics bachelor degree and for physics teaching degrees. And I will close with a famous motto of a pre-Socratic philosopher, Protagoras. He said, "Paton primaton, metron anthropos." That means it's the person that gives the value to everything. That means, in our case, teachers' personality, character, and behavior are the key factors for a successful teaching career. I want to thank, of course, all the members of the working group 3 of the previous, and of course, all colleagues who participated in this, because that I presented is a collaborative work. Thank you.
Thank you for this.
I think that everything, discussion and questions, etc., will be evaluated during the discussion about the future of this. But if somebody wants...
Some question on...
Also here is Henrik, who was the leader of the steps, and Jan, the leader of steps 2, etc. And Nikos were, yes.
Pardon, may pronounce to say it differently, teachers teach always the way they have been taught. If to some extent this is true,
I don't want to enter in the interpretation of mottos, because as you know, interpretation is...
No, forget it. Teachers teach, in most of the cases, the way they have been taught.
Yes.
From this perspective, the missing element there is the responsibility of professors at the university level to become models for the teachers at any level of education.
Yes, it holds also.
Okay, so thanks again, Vaggelis. Okay, now to the last block, and as you see in your program, I will just give you some ideas, suggestions, also how we should proceed, how we may proceed in the next phase. And this is the outcome of several discussions with Marisa and also with Aleš and others. But before I start, let me remind you on someone special. In the preparation of hope and also working on the application, there was one person heavily involved. And this person was Elena Sassi. And she was also intended to be chair of Working Group 4. So I think we should a little bit remind on her. She died too early, and Elena Sassi was a great person. She was a motivating teacher, a profound scientist, but always had one in her focus. These were the young persons, young students, children, to interest them in physics and to guide them to physics, to tie a stronger bond to physics. So Elena, we will not forget you, we will not forget your ideas, and especially in Working Group 4, I think we will try to follow some of her ideas. Okay. Title is Improvement in the Training and Supply of Physics Teachers. So the focus is teachers. We have heard this in the last 2 talks. And also we heard the importance of a teacher from a Greek philosopher, and we have support from a modern scientist, and we have support from a meta-study. And you know, this study by John Hattie about visible learning was discussed a lot in different countries, maybe not always at the same time, with some delay. I will not enter the discussion here, but I think one thing is again undisputable, namely the outcome is what teachers do matters. They are also important component in teaching, but it's very often what the teacher makes out of this. How the teacher brings this into the classroom or in the lecture hall, this is what really matters. And this is also the input and also the focus of our working group. I don't know if it's this kind of ideas or if there are some burning issues, but it's a fact that we have many, many partners within hope. You see here we have 44 partners, and thanks to you that many, many of you were coming to this first meeting here in Zagreb. As I said, at the next I will just put forward some issues, maybe to start the discussion today in the evening and then tomorrow. We heard already about the past, namely about the work in steps in steps 2. By Vaggelis, we will hear a little bit more about the benchmarks tomorrow by Vitoratos. I think several points may be important for our work. First of all, we really should be aware of the work and we should not repeat things. A lot of data have been taken already. But there were several years since steps 2, there was also a time gap in between. I think we should look at the effects, about the lasting effects. What there are some output which can be seen several years later. There are several recommendations. Did they work? This maybe would be interesting. And of course, there are several points, and Vaggelis put it out already, some where we should continue, where we should maybe sharpen the question, but at least we should build on the work done by steps 2. And there were new developments. Okay? So, the Bologna process was late, usually for teacher education. So in some countries it started after steps 2. Also, there were new methods, new ideas. You see, first we had constructivism, now competences entered in several countries. So there was also a change. Of course, not just in-house, we had investigation on teacher education. At the international and national level, many investigations have been done. We heard one in the first lecture by Chris Shepard about the Institute of Physics. Another international huge program is Teacher. So we invited one person, Peter Birch, also to give us the results. Unfortunately, he could not come, but I think we should invite him for one of the next sections. And again here, there are several points we should keep in mind. Again, it would be wasted time and efforts to repeat things. So we should be aware of what's going on and what was done by other projects. And on the other hand, we should use what we are, namely a network of 44 countries. And we have the insight of what is going on in our own country. And we have the ability to compare them, to collect them and to compare them. And also I think we should use this ability. This, for example, could not be done or not so easily be done, for example, by an institute at some university. They are in one point, at one place, but we are already spread over, and we have a lot of knowledge within our group. I don't know how far we should go, namely also to look at programs outside of our partners. Working on some specific topic, I think we have to. This is just a scientific way of doing it. But nevertheless, it's a question. How far should we go and to look at other projects? Yeah, looking at, again, at this title of our working group, Improvements in the Training and Supply of Physics Teachers. I think one can split this into 4 different groups. Namely, some general aspects, which are usually a little bit higher up, more or less on the political basis, but not down in school at the teacher level. Then it is strictly, of course, connected to education in physics. But, of course, by this we need pedagogy and what is called PCK, pedagogical content knowledge. And as already was stressed before, the professional development, the in-service trainings are very, very important. So I think there are 4 areas in this program, general areas. So let me discuss them a little bit in detail. General aspects. One we heard already, and it seems really a burning issue in many countries, shortage of physics teachers. connected or maybe not connected, as we have seen as before, the recognition or payment of teachers. I spoke already of the implementation of the Bologna process in physics teacher education. This is a different thing than in the education of physics towards a diploma or PhD. And also one thing which could be very important is which careers do exist in the different countries with respect to physics education. So there are very clear careers in physics, how to go up one step to the other. Okay? Going from diploma to PhD to habilitation and so on and so on. With regard to physics education, this is much more difficult, and in some countries it's even not established. Physics education. We know about these benchmarks. I think they were very successful, very useful. The question is, should we promote them? Have they been forgotten already? Or should we extend them? These benchmarks were for teacher education at the secondary level. Okay? Would it be useful to make similar benchmarks for teacher education at secondary 1 level? And discuss. Again, one point which has been stressed already by Vaggelis, namely, is it better that one teacher teaches one subject, so he has more or less a full education in one subject, or he has to teach, or is allowed to teach, as you see, 2 subjects. Which subject? Combined with mathematics, or any combination, as it is in some countries. I think we have the ability to collect here experiences, information. I didn't see any study about this. Yeah, of course, our aim is that the best students should go and should become a physics teacher. Okay? But this will not be possible, but we have already some suggestions how to attract more good students to become physics teachers. And again, the status of teacher education in physics departments. I think not only that the students are very often rated second compared to the diploma students, but also the persons who are involved in training these students are not always rated equally to the others. I don't know how to overcome this, but I think maybe we should think. And I think this would help, okay, this recognition. It goes down to school and so on and so on. Pedagogical content knowledge, also here we will have a talk tomorrow by Marisa. Although this is a little bit compared to physics education. There we have a lot of textbooks, clear information. With regard to PCK, this is not so clear. Do we have good curricula? Do we have good, excellent textbooks for PCK? How is this evaluated? Of course, it's not so easy. It's much easier to evaluate the knowledge in physics. How to evaluate the knowledge, whatever this is, in PCK? This is connected to practical works. And I think the next issue also seems to me very important. We have heard already that in several stages mentors are involved. Okay? So who are these mentors? Who are they trained? Who are they selected? Okay? Which material do they have for their professional development? I think this is very unclear in many countries. Usually they are experienced teachers who enter here and play a role. This can be very good, but I think also here it needs a little bit more professionalism. And the same is with apprenticeship. Okay? Who are the persons there? Who looking at this young person who is going to school and has his first and her first lesson? Again, are these persons trained, or are they just the experienced teachers, or the oldest teachers, or whatever. Yeah, here are already with professional development. Again, here, with professional development, there are several questions. For example, has the right to teach be renewed at some stage? It's completely different in different countries. So tomorrow, Aleš will speak about Slovenia and the situation there. Okay? In some countries, a teacher becomes a teacher, the last exam at the university, and then he is teacher forever, for 40 years, independently what he is doing. Okay? Gets the same salary, and there's no obligation, and this is the next point, there's no obligation also for in-service training. But also, if there is an obligation, in which way is it done, and so on and so on. Who is doing this professional development? Who is organizing? Very often, these are not the universities. They are institutions outside. How is it done? And then, of course, and also already, there are several different ways in doing here in-service training, and I think it would be very interesting for us really to find not just one model, as we have by Vaggelis from Antwerp, but to look at the different countries where are good models for in-service training and professional development. Yeah. So these were just a collection of ideas. We heard several of them already before. Just to give you some input and something to think about during dinner or during night, because tomorrow we have and we will discuss about this. And we think that this group is a little bit too large for this kind of discussion. So we have and will split into subgroups. But how many? And which topics should we attribute to these subgroups? In the discussion before, we were warned a little bit, out of the experience also with other working groups, not to make too many subgroups, and several persons told us, make just two. Okay? So we will discuss this tomorrow. It's open to you. You are the persons who are in charge of it. But we have tomorrow really decide about this, how many subgroups will we make, and also which topics should be attributed to this. So my proposal first, we have these 4 groups, but there can be others. Okay? So, which tasks should these subgroups work on? Of course, I cannot enter in the topic, but I think we should be aware that these tasks should be feasible. So, it should be something that could be done in our limited time, more or less 1 year, with our limited efforts and persons. Okay? And therefore, I think we should concentrate on a few important questions and also not on the most difficult ones. So I think we should not enter into a problem which has been unsolved for the last 40 or 30 years. Okay? So this is just my opinion. We should see, not always jump into what's really interesting, and then we have such a big problem we will never solve in 1 year. But, and I repeat myself, we should really always think that we are a network. And we should use the possibilities we have as a network and try to combine things which are here within us. Which method to use? Yeah, of course, number 1 very often is a questionnaire. And some of you are already in working group 1, 2, 3, and you have seen already questionnaires. I'm a little bit skeptical if questionnaires are the proper tools to answer those questions which have been raised by the persons before and also by me. Look, for example, at in-service. Okay, I think it would be maybe better to look very careful at several examples of models of in-service training than to make a huge questionnaire. And then to collect models and then to compare them and to find good ones. So this is now, of course, a problem. What is good and what is not good? And here I think we should not rely on the opinion even of experienced persons. I think we should look at evaluations. And if we have an example in some country of some model of in-service training, I think first we should ask, is it to some extent evaluated? Or is it just the opinion of one person that this is a good example? In our application for hope, it's stated that we also here employ and use physics education research, physics education research. I think we should not only tell them results of physics education research, I think we should use also the tools of physics education research. For example, in comparing examples. Yeah, now a little bit how it will go on. Okay. So tomorrow we will have some short introductory talks about 3 of the 4 components I have told you. Tito about benchmarks, Madine of PCT, and Mohorić about professional development. Then we will have a general discussion in the plenum, and there we have to discuss a number of groups, what we should do. Then the whole afternoon will be devoted to the work in the subgroups. Then we will have a presentation about outcomes of this afternoon, but these rapporteurs are needed who really make a little bit of a summary. That this will be one of the first tasks for these working groups to find 1 or 2 persons who are doing this. Saturday we continue because maybe during night some new ideas came up. We continue the work in subgroups, and then, as was already announced by Darko, we have the pleasure to see a program by the Croatian Physical Society and the Teacher Association, namely 20 basic experiments on hydrodynamics and hydrodynamics. I think it will be, and I think all of this is a topic which is often neglected in a physics curriculum, school and also at university. And finally, we will try to conclude and give some outlook. How will this be embedded in these meetings? So the first meeting now really should focus on discussion, on proposals, and we should decide how we will proceed, what we will do in the next year. The second meeting, Madine announced it already, will be in Riga in 5th to 7th of November. Here, a main point will be the contributions from the partner along the tasks we will decide tomorrow. And then, finally, the forum in Bucharest, the dates are not decided yet, will be the presentation of our results, and then we will give recommendations. So, for whom are we working?
For us.
Yes. I think the first thing will be for us. We should work on things we are interested in, and we should be satisfied about the outcome. But as you see already, of course, the center of our work should finally be this group of young persons. Students at school, students at university. But to approach them, of course, we need a teacher, and therefore the teacher is in the interest of our work. Here, this is a sculpture of Cottbus, a young teacher in the park there. Outreach. So, whom to address, how we will publish, how we will make outreach of our results. Again, I think the main group will be teachers. If you really produce material important for teachers, then of course this should be directed to the physics education community. Teacher training, teacher trainers, and so on. This should be visible as broad as possible, and therefore I think we will use here the homepage of HOPE, but also the homepage needs some advertisement, and so really we should work hard that people know this and check that they will look at it. If we want to change things higher up, then we have to approach decision makers, politicians. This is not easy, and I think the best way is to approach them personally. It is even less easy. But I think what we need is that we make recommendations in a short and precise way. Okay? I think it doesn't make sense to make long papers. Half a page is often much better. It's often also more difficult to put important things in half a page, but I think also we should try to work on this. That the output of what we are doing should be really in a concise and short way, and then to give it again to us, we should go again back to our countries and try to change things there. Okay, I think I'm more or less finished. But again, you see there are suggestions, but you are the group who is going to decide where we will go, how we will proceed, with which methods we will proceed, and also how we will make the outreach. In this sense, we, Marisa, Alex and me, are looking forward to our cooperation. Thank you. And now, Darko, the program is dinner. What? Banquet. Sorry.
Basically, I have nothing to say except for the people who come after my last talk. I can give you bench and all the gifts at the front. Tomorrow morning we will meet at lobby 8:30. And the guided walk or guided tram, okay, it's not travel actually because we are traveling just 2 stations. The university will be organized, and for the people who have problem with the walking or rest, I will take them personally to the university. Tomorrow we will have a social event at 9 o'clock in a place we already do our dinner. It's a neighbor room named Vaggelis. Vaggelis is a famous person in Croatian history, and I'm really enjoying, okay, because in all Europe, only Hungarian hate Ban Jelačić. All the rest of Europe basically has some good memories of this guy because he did a very nice thing for the Austro-Hungarian monarchy in 19th century and so. But because there are no Hungarian here, we can enjoy in Ban Jelačić completely. So that's all for tonight from me. Of course, you can ask some personal or other personal questions during the summer. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.